even while it is only the revolutionist, whoever he is, somebody thinking in a different way, who individually in a certain way evolves, and specifically only he who actually knows whether he is thinking more than he has to. Beyond all of that, do take note that even at the ordinary level, humanity continues to intellectually, just quite mechanically and having nothing to do with an individual, but it continues, humanity, to intellectually and collectively expand. And in a very specific way, you could look upon an individuals, what do they call it? Personality. Thank you. An individual's personality, if you would, for tonight, you could look upon it in a sense as civilization writ small. And in a specific way, regarding what we've been talking about, as I'm about to spring on you again, well, I already did about thinking more than you have to, but you could quite truthfully, and it is, of course, as always, symbolic, or we couldn't even say it, but it is beyond symbolic. There is a tangible reality to saying that an individual's personality, just an ordinary person, you could say that the individual's personality is the history, the continuing history, not a dead history, but a living history of civilization writ small. No offense to your personality. Some of you have smaller personalities than others, but perhaps you'd like to meet the plastic surgeon that hung himself. But you could look upon the development of both. That is, the living collective civilization, the continuing civilization. Now I'm using that as a verb now. The march of civilization, the continuing civilizing of man. You could look at that and an individual, even just an ordinary individual. You could look upon them both being involved in a continuing struggle over which none of them have any knowledge. And the struggle I will describe as being the attempt for facts to overcome acts. Well, let me put it another way to start with. It is the struggle for acts, for facts to overtake acts. Let's put it that way before we get into overcome. And in this ongoing process, you have facts, and you could say a little more specifically, it doesn't change the meaning, but explanations regarding any particular act that the human intellect at the ordinary level, collectively, any group of people, civilization, this planet in general, or an individual. Them looking upon some particular act. It reaches a saturation level individually, but I was going to start you out still. They're running in a parallel way, but also collectively. The way in which the intellect is individual and collectively, looking upon any particular act, it will reach a saturation point, whereas the facts do overtake the acts themselves. It becomes such a widespread acceptance, either in here with an individual or out there in some group of people. It reaches such a widespread acceptance that we're back to what we've talked about before, that it functionally just overwhelms. It overtakes, it catches up with the act, which, remember, always precedes. Facts only arise from acts. But it constructively, it operationally, at the ordinary level, overtakes and then overcomes, it consumes the act that actually gave it birth. It ends up being that the act, the fact, the explanation becomes accepted as damn near being the actual cause of the act. Now, you recall some nights ago we went through this when I originally brought it up. And all of you should be able to see it. You can't go prove it, and it's not that life is incorrect. It is the operations of the nervous system here at the ordinary level that explanations, even immediately, will be taken as causes. Even if you stopped and tried to play with words with an ordinary person and made them say, which is quite possible to do, to make them say, well, you're right. What we're saying is a cause. It's not actual cause. That is to say, why is little Johnny a drunk? Because his daddy was a drunk. Well, that explains that. Until you say, well, no, it doesn't. And then you can get people to go for a second, well, you're right, because it doesn't explain why his daddy was a drunk. But it is taken without any analyzation. It will be taken as not only being a representation of the cause, an expose of the cause, but in a real, from a verbal viewpoint, a real torted way, the explanation, that is the fact, will become damn near accepted without being able to analyze it verbally, but will become accepted as damn near being not just the cause, that is a representation of the cause, but that now the fact calls the act. You can't say I didn't warn you. It becomes almost like for all of you legal students and aficionados, it is like the ultimate commingling of funds. You know, the attorney said, well, I didn't mean to spend my client's money. I thought that part of it was mine. The human intellect cannot distinguish at the ordinary level, collectively or individually, where the facts begin to take over from the act originally, and a little vice versa. I was about to push a little bit further. It operates, to expand the description a little bit that we hit once or twice already, but it operates like this. Remember, all of you now, you swore, you voted, you signed your name. I remember just a few nights ago, it was just, by God, it was earlier this year, you admitted that you understood that if you're going to divide up in a reasonable, descriptive manner the world of man into acts and facts, that all facts, not right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, but all facts arise from acts. I've even seen philosophers and people who wore berets back in the 50s before it was illegal in decent society even try to point out that, hey, you can't make up anything. You can't draw a totally imaginary animal, because all you can do is draw like either a pig with wings or an attorney with a conscience. You know, some imaginary animal, but you have to you just have to take two or more known entities and put them together, and then you say, hey, that's an imaginary, it's a griffin. You mean Merv or the thing? I don't know. But it'll still never fly. It's way too overweight. It will not get off the ground. There is a basis for that. Nobody can explain why, and people's played around with Zen or pseudo-Zen games with it about why can't you actually think up something totally original. It's because, I don't think anybody's ever taken it this far in the ordinary world, but I just hit it right quick. If indeed facts, in the full sense of that word, that anybody would take it, if facts in some way exist in the way that ordinary humans tend to think they would, then you could make up something new. But facts are not something that came with the sunrise. Facts are not something that was shipped in here from another reality. Facts are not something that men got together and tinkered around and went, hey, let's come up with something. We can beat this kind of stuff of garbage, you know, ugly men and women and people that wear socks without washing them, and we can beat that. Except you can't, because facts must arise from acts. I'm glad we didn't waste too much time doing that. In other words, there is no such thing as imagination. Not in that sense, not the people ordinarily say, because there had to be an act, a good primary act, almost down to 3 different acts. And everything, all the facts have arisen from that. If men were not engaged, as they quite properly are, the reasonable ones, in at least the 3 main primary acts to keep one as alive, at least, as your neighborhood beaver and mink, and rabbit, if they were not involved with those three basic acts, there would be no facts. And you can trace the lineage, if you want to go back, you can trace the mother and the father and the whole family of every fact in the world, if you wanted to go back far enough, and you would trace it back to, may I suggest, if you wanted to, three primary acts. But you can't get past acts. Where they're not acts, there would be no facts of any kind. I don't matter how theoretical, no matter how abstract they may seem to be. So at any rate, all of you agreed. You swore that you understood that some time back. But now can you see that that kind of linear progression cannot be held in one's mind because of the fact that the process can seem to be reversed, in the sense that people will accept, ordinary intellect will accept facts, explanations. They will accept facts without being able to see it clearly. They'll accept them as being the father of the acts, which is, among other reasons, if you really think you lost your place, is why I point out that life can, in a three-dimensional sense, even churn up more energy, such as with conflicts between individuals and especially large groups, collective groups, stir up conflicts where they seem to be fighting over facts as opposed to acts. That is, fighting over a political theory, a religious doctrine, as opposed to fighting over women, fighting over property, fighting over water rights, fighting over something that would be closer to the primary world of acts. But the way this works out, that I said that we'd hit once or twice, I was hoping you could flesh it out a little bit more yourself, because it sort of goes like this. That is, of acts, in a sense, becoming damn near accepted. I mean, facts as being the cause of the acts, which is not that simple, but to start off see it, it's almost a reversal of an irreversible process. Facts do not give birth to acts. Oh, I know they do. Oh, I knew that. Even before I pointed my finger, I knew that. But here's the way it goes. And I know I used to do this in A flat, but it goes like this. That the once pretend becomes the newly real. Then that becomes old, and it becomes too near actual. Actual, near actual. Then men's thinking at the ordinary level extends itself. It creates new pretends. And all of this serves to keep the intellectual secondary world alive and moving. And as we already mentioned when we brought this up, the terms of pretend is not by any means nailed to the three-dimensional floor that ordinary intellect would have it, that it's some sort of non-existent, that it's something that is non-functional. Tut, tut, tut. People really give a bad name to pretend, especially those who do not understand it, because if you strip them of pretend, what would they have? They'd be probably down to, oh, I don't know, a pair of cheap sneakers, maybe one or two Wagner albums, and a real bad haircut and headache. No love life, no political ideas, no interest in the news. A sorry state of affairs, I must say. So by pretend now, we're talking about the world of acts. But it operates like that which was once pretend. If we went past the first act and man went goo-goo, dada, we started being civilized. He started dealing in facts. They are newly arrived compared to the act, compared to the individual act of being alive. For those of you who didn't like the Kyroots, or the kid that was 2 hours old, an old man gave me advice already. You didn't laugh then, so don't laugh now then. After the initial act, the individual act of being born, what you start dealing with is pretend. with no qualitative judgment on that. It is being civilized. It is the continual struggle for facts to overcome, to overtake acts. It is the everyday, absolutely inescapable, quite admirable, let's go ahead and say that to make life happy, process of being civilized. Because you cannot be civilized if you're dealing at simply at an actual level. You will be as uncouth, uncivilized, as feral, as bad a neighbor, I don't know, as a Republican with a rash. No one would want to be around you, and if you had any sense at all, you wouldn't want to be around you. You'd keep asking, where are those smells coming from? And you'd never look. You'd think, who is it has these dumb ideas? And you'd never look in the right place. And you'd keep thinking, boy, has the neighborhood gone down, without realizing that you are the only person within 500 square miles. So pretend is a step forward. People they don't use these kinds of terms, but as soon as a kid starts pretending, such as he starts pretending that, all right, I won't do it in the floor in my pants. I'll go all the way in the bathroom and I'll fool around with pulling the seat down, all that crap. And he pretends, boy, ain't I a great kid? It's pretend. Who wants to do that when you can do it in the floor? Wherever you're sitting, you just do it. But you become civilized. I mean, if you're, 6 months old, people still laugh. If you're their parents and go, oh, how cute. Doo-doo in the floor. If you're 45... Now, even your parents, I suggest, if they indeed are just reasonably civilized, they're probably not going to go, oh, how sweet. So you're pretending, literally. I know that kind of got a chuckle, but you are pretending. Or to grab food. And they say, oh, no, no, no. And you start to become civilized. And your parents say, no, you share that with your sister. You don't take it all. You'll feel better. And of course you find out that feeling better ain't got nothing to do with it. They're just going to slap the crap out of you if you don't. And so you share it with your sister. And they say, don't you feel better? And here comes the big P. You pretend. But you're not feeling better. Nobody does. But you're becoming civilized. Life is growing. But here's what happens. I want you to see this one little thing again. That which was pretend. That is the continuing growth of the civilizing influence of life. The civilizing basis of man's secondary intellectual world, which he could not have if he were still dealing with acts solely. So the once pretend becomes, in a sense, the newly real. And again, as I'm sure some of you can hear, the term doesn't mean much, and don't try to choke or think I was just trying to be cute and think of a new term, but that's about the only way to say it. It becomes the newly real. That is that now you get past the age of 2 or 3, and let's say that you are in high school, and when you're civilized enough that you're sitting there even with relative strangers, at least not your sister anymore, and maybe you see somebody, you picked up the last sandwich there in the cafeteria. And you sit at a table with just somebody you slightly know, and maybe you're sitting there and or they sit down, they got a cup of coffee or something, and you say, aren't you hungry? And they say, well, all the food was gone, they're about to close. And you just look down at your sandwich, and you've eaten half, and you might say, you mean nothing else? And they go, no. And then it's no longer pretend, in a sense, that you might go, well, I'm in a hurry, I got to get to class anyway, do you want half this sandwich? And the person might go, oh, I couldn't take your sandwich. You say, oh, no, go ahead, next time you catch me, and the person said, well, I appreciate it. I really didn't get to eat. Let's assume, with no cynicism, no nothing, because all of you are that civilized, we'll assume. It is now, in a sense, newly real. But you do understand, we can back up and do that little thing again, that as a kid, and it didn't just disappear, because your genes are still numerous ages. But all of you did understand that a kid, you could see, a kid in a sense is pretending when he gets to the point that your mother looks when your sister comes up and she begins to reach for the piece of pizza that you got, and you start to hit her, and then you see them and you pretend, oh, Would you want some of this? And it's pretend. And if they go through stuff like, now don't you feel better? Don't you feel more grown up, like part of the family? And you go, yes, I do. And no, you don't. Not then. But it's a gradual process. So in a sense, that which was pretend, as opposed to, get the hell away from my pizza. Why should I share? Nobody wants to share. That's an act. But that which at one time was pretend, let's fast forward. You're now 19, sitting there in the cafeteria at the college, like I said, and you just, in a sense, voluntarily offered to share to somebody. And you understand enough, let me do much more, that by then we'll assume that it is newly real. But in a sense, you weren't born doing that. Okay. So it's become newly real. But then when that, and perhaps on an individual level, we're getting to a tricky point because the person may not go much further than that. But collectively, what I want you to see over the whole span of so-called recorded history of man is even that which was at once pretend. It then reaches the newly real, the newly almost actual, but newly real. That is, that you now appear to be of a sharing mode. That it just seems to be that if a dastardly person, a spirit, an aberration, leaped out from under your table and said, I can't believe you gave away the half of the last sandwich. And you smiled and said, go ahead, I don't mind. I don't think you meant that. Let's assume again that you're just a reasonable, ordinary person, and you could turn to this voice and say, well, you're too cynical. I did. I wasn't that hungry, and part of what I said was true. Maybe maybe I could have eaten it. I'll agree to that. But it was no big deal. They didn't have one. I mean, that's life. You got to look after each other. I mean, it's no big deal. Don't be cynical. In other words, it is now, relatively speaking, you could say it is now newly real to you. That it is now part of your personality. But then collectively, that, over a long period of time, or even a short period of time, whichever one you like, then that which was at one time pretend, and then that which is now nearly real, newly real even, it too becomes, after a certain period of time, in a collective sense. We're really getting past the point of any individual significance to use as an example with ordinary people. But over a period of time, it becomes such a widespread. That is, let us say that in the group that I was describing, the area of this planet where I was describing that you were now 19, let's say that the majority of those people were now civilized, that your behavior of turning around to another person, almost a stranger, just somebody that you know enough, you know they're in school, you see them in class, and you say, were they out of sandwiches again? Would you want half of this? Let's say now that is, generally speaking, the social de rigueur. That just people in general, you would expect that nowadays. Not in every individual case, but that now has become the accepted social norm. You understand? It is now real. And it's not just, they might want to discuss it as well, that's just being civilized and decent. But it's beyond now just fact. It's beyond just explanation. It's beyond just talk. That those that might never have any occasion throughout their 70 years on this planet to ever discuss it, about being charitable, just being decent, being neighborly, they still operate on that basis. Do you understand? They might never talk about it. No spirit, no voice, no smart aleck ever jumps in and say, hey, I remember as a kid you were a real rotten little bastard. I can't believe you're not all that civilized and nice nowadays. You're just faking it. That's some kind of pretense. Let's say that many people never have any occasion to discuss. They're simply middle class. They're simply middle of the bell curve. They are simply, and of course by middle class I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, they are simply the heart breath of life in man. So that it's no longer just fact. You understand? It's no longer fact, not individually, but now collectively. It's no longer fact. It's no longer discussion. It's no longer theory about should we, under reasonable conditions, share. Should we sort of look after our fellow man in as small a way as sharing a sandwich? The person will not die. They can get home without dying if I do not give them a sandwich. But it's no longer something theoretical. It's no longer collectively. It's no longer a discussion even internally. It is simply now the mode of operation. In other words, it has become near act. Do you understand? It is now newly real. that it's not just talk. It's not just a facade. It's not, in the sense that ordinary intelligence would think that I start out using the term. Do you understand? It's not pretense. Even if it was pretense with this individual when they were 6 years old, and even if it was pretense with this whole group of people, this whole segment of life 600 years ago. But over in this one area that we're discussing theoretically, it is no longer pretend at all. It is now newly real. But it reaches a point of total saturation. That is, it becomes part of the reality of that group. And then guess what? I don't know. It's no longer sufficient. It has become, and of course we got to make hand gestures. You do? Okay. In the three-dimensional world, it would appear to be another level. That is, if we start down here and everything was axe, we're all crawling out of the ocean on our little slimy bellies, billions of years ago, some of us in better shape than others, and some of us with real out-of-date bathing suits on. And that's reality. But then we become civilized, and we quit chewing off each other's tail and eating each other's little eggs, and we become humans. And so which was actual moves up to factual. And then we all get civilized, and we will share the little bugs and the sandwiches we catch. And so then this level of pretense, that is that we're now civilized Gila monsters, lizards, turtles, even an accountant and an orthodontist here and there. Then that which was pretense, going up from us just being actual creatures, primary creatures, but then this becomes the new level of reality. And when that happens, this is no longer sufficient. That which was pretend is now real. That which was in a past uncivilized behavior from one viewpoint, is now at another level. It has become civilized and it's become the norm. And so now, to be civilized today is not enough. It's always as though life is asking, oh sure, you're civilized, but what have you done for me lately? It keeps going up. People become more and more civilized. And it gets very interesting, and I don't obviously have time tonight, but we're living in the midst of one that's just a raging battle going on now. In case none of you, I'll just give you, see if you can figure out. It's going on in the Western world. It appears to be at the height of the world of great academia. This very thing that from one view, quite valid view, you can say, Jesus, the intellectual structure of this part of the world is about to crumble. And yet something else is going on. The reality, by everybody's view, the civilized intellectual reality that was the stable, accepted norm just a few years ago, and of course many people since the genes, remember, are simultaneously of every possible age. Not just here, but even, dare I say it, Princeton, Yale. That which was real, that which was indisputably the cornerstone of this or that, some intellectual, some institutional idea, is now under such brazen, ignorant attack as to make people want to throw up their hands. It is simply that the water keeps going up. You know, if you were 3 feet tall and civilized and the intellectual giant of your day, I got news for you. The creek keeps going up and you're going to strangle. You can be down there, you're looking now at the knees of giants. And you can be saying, well, these guys are not giants, they're not any smarter than I am. But if you knew that, you shouldn't be down there drowning, you're a revolutionist. But nobody does. They're down there beating on everybody else's kneecaps, saying, you can't do this. And the only thing they're doing is growing enough so that the waters of civilization don't drown them. Because it's got you, of course, by then you're dead. And as a lot of you know, that's one of the few benefits of being dead is you can't drown a dead man. So they say. You might also care to note that in a sense, the whole thing of facts overtaking acts is sort of like the nature of an invading army, as opposed to an occupying army, an occupying force. That facts overtaking acts is never a fait accompli, because it is like they may overtake it, but now all of you know the difference between, just in the militaristic and Hollywood sense, an invading army and an occupying force. An invading army, no matter if they've been invading your territory for 50 years, the reason they do not call them an occupying force is they are continuing to meet what? Nice looking chicks? No! Resistance! Boy. Some of the answers I get. Who said that? It's an invading army if they invaded yesterday or if they invaded 5,000 years ago, if resistance is still going on. You're only an occupying force when the resistance is gone, right? Sure. So, do you see? The battle is never over. Facts overtaking acts. It's always on the basis of it's an invading army. No matter where you look, that is if you can see. If you're an ordinary person, you don't think so. Because you always are thinking that something has come to some sort of conclusion in your lifetime. You know, pro or con, good or bad. To get these foreigners out of here. That is, these foreign ideas. Get away these new pretends. I want to go back to the old pretends. Of course, ordinary people don't say it that way. They say, I want to go back when things were right. When we lived as God and the governor of Alabama meant for us to live. Or whoever it is. And all they're saying is, the water's rising. All they're saying is there no end to this? And of course there is, but they don't want to think about it. At any rate, since I'd use the term overtake, because it is like a continuing onslaught. It is facts, in a sense, continually chasing acts, trying to overcome them. That is what the whole drift, the whole drive of civilization, collectively and individually, is. But notice, it never reaches a point of success that even at the best, or from an ordinary view, the older ordinary people get, and their genes begin to wear down, the worse from their view. But the best that can be said is, it is like an invading army. But they never quiet the new locale. Well, if they do, you're dead. But it's always like a continuing attempt for the new ideas, that is, the new areas of the human brain in which energy is expanding. It's like them continually having to stamp out, to try and stamp out, these little subversive brush fires. There's always a Castro in somebody's hills. There's always a Lenin boarded up in some train flying through in the middle of the night, and you're thinking, who was that? You remember, it's a king. Remember, without foes, no king can reign. And it's always a matter. The king will keep calling in the head of his KGB or the CIA or his Sears and Roebuck outlet, and he'll say, all right, who is it today? And the head of his secret police, his head guard, now he may get by for a few days or months by saying, well, everything seems relatively quiet. But you do understand, any king, and he doesn't know why, that if he keeps calling in his head of security and he says, all right, who's giving us trouble? Who is the next potential foe? In too long a time, the head of security said, well, nobody as far as I can tell. You know what he's going to think, don't you? It's him. Because to stay king, you not only got to eat, get your crown shined up every now and then, take a bath, you got to periodically kill people. Now, you know we're not talking about politics, folks. We're talking about the rule up here. We're talking about the movement of energy into a new area. We're talking about the discovery, the domination of a new territory, except not at the expense of any natives, because nobody's there. That's why you can go over there and be the whole new seat of power, plus you can be all the people, because there is nobody there. That you are now not king at the expense of some new people. You have not gone into a new territory and invaded it. You have, but nobody was there. The territory almost wasn't there. Well, to ordinary thought, it almost is not there. But the best you could get ordinary people, I guess, to say is they will say, well, yeah, I did read in Popular Mechanics some years ago, or was it Psychology Today, that somebody said that we'd only use some portion of our brain, but how the hell do they know? So the whole idea of saying that you're going to move into an unoccupied territory up here, if you say that to ordinary intelligence, yours or anybody else's, what's it going to say? Where? Jesus Christ, I'm thinking as much as I can now. Don't talk to me about, you mean I'm going to have more thoughts? You mean if I listen to this kind of crap, I'm going to think more than I do now? Hey, not in your lifetime. I'm getting out of here. Because with an ordinary person, do they want to think any more than they are now? It's too late. You should have answered already. Nobody wants to think any more than they do now. If anything, as witnessed by, no offense, but television, alcohol, drugs, sports, all forms of entertainment, nobody wants to think as much as they are now. Not in that sense, but of course that's the way things are supposed to be. Because you reach the point that you think just as much as you should, and then you're supposed to go ahead and turn your ticket and go sit in the stands. And that's it. The rest of your life you pay to see somebody else do something and you watch them. And I don't mean just get in bed together or play football. Somebody else think. Because it's life thinking. It's collectively life is moving. That collectively life does expand the way in which it thinks. And after a certain age, 6, let's say 16. All right, is that okay with you? After that, you turn in your ticket. Get yourself a big orange, maybe a seat cushion, and go sit down. And you watch it. That is, you watch the rest of life expanding. Oh, I know, man, of course, if you're lucky, you sit down next to some woman and you say, oh, if you're getting up, would you bring me another big orange? That's about the extent of your exercise intellectually. Individually, that is. Well, in the sense, I'm not going to be able to go any further, I guess, but in the sense, if you do see what I'm talking about, that in the sense that thinking more than you have to, and only the individual knows, and in the sense that out in the collective, automatic area of facts continually attempting to overtake and overcome, and then replace, and the process keeps going, spiraling, for facts to overtake acts, in the sense that you can see where I was, if you did, that it could be described as an invading army. That is, this whole process of facts overtaking acts at one level. And then the process, of course, keeps going, if you followed what I said, that in a sense then these facts become almost new acts, near acts, to the point that they are so deep rooted in the thinking of some group of people, so widespreadly accepted that they become down there. You might as well say, operationally, they become now acts. And so the process keeps going on that this invading army never completely stamps out rebellion, which is another way of saying that they do not manage to come in and stamp out life. So in that sense, that this process out there, but individual is the only thing that should be of interest to you now. In that sense, you could see it as being an invading army as opposed to an occupying force of it actually coming in and taking over. I was going to leave you by asking this, that even after saying that, if there was, which has got to be, or we couldn't have said as opposed to, if the normal scheme of this movement, the progression of civilization, writ large out there, writ small in here, and it being indicative, describably so, as the continuing attempt for facts to overtake and overcome acts, if that could be seen as a non-stop, ongoing, invading army, then what would be an occupying force? And I was going to say, could it be? Could it possibly be? What? Could it be revolutionist thinking? I know that many of you enjoy it so much that we will leave it at a shrug. Not a shrub, sir. A shrug. That means work on it yourself. No, you don't have to trim it or plant. No, never mind. The rest of you, good night.